What if I told you that there was one particular aspect of your personality that predisposed you to exploitation? Understanding this particular trait can help you further know why you find yourself in controlling and abusive relationships with emotional predators. So I want to broaden your horizons beyond just the terms narcissist and psychopath and widen your perspective so you're able to see human behavior in a way that can offer you even more insights and a deeper understanding into why certain people behave the way they do. Becoming aware of this empowered me to change my life, and it made it easier for me to motivate myself to make changes that seemed impossible. So further understanding the theory I'm going to discuss in this video can help you tremendously in making sense of people's behavior that seemed odd. And yes, even those who meet the criteria for pathological narcissism and antisocial personality disorder. But most of all, what I really want to bring home is that we need to know that the world is not just filled with narcissists and non-narcissists. This kind of black and white thinking is ignorant, so I hope to articulate this concept in a way that's useful for you and that it sheds even more light on your path towards self-empowerment. You need to know that there are certain things about us that make us more likely to attract exploitative and parasitic relationships. And the great thing is, once you know, you then have a choice. You can implement strategies and modify your behavior. And this video is in reference to what psychologists call the Big Five personality theory, where they assess 5 traits of a person's personality. In this video, I'll only be discussing one trait because it's extremely helpful for people healing from narcissistic abuse and especially important for empaths and highly sensitive people to understand. So this particular personality trait that makes you a target for exploitation is agreeableness. Well, to be more specific, it's if you have a high level of agreeableness. So what is agreeableness? Well, agreeableness can be perceived in another person or in yourself as being kind, cooperative, sympathetic. You aim to please. You're good-natured. You're warm, likable, polite, compassionate, modest, tactful, friendly, thoughtful. You're trusting and you're tolerant and you're sensitive to the needs of others. You're very forgiving and very empathetic. So all of these terms can be used to describe agreeableness. Now let's remember that everything that's measured in psychology is on a continuum. And researchers measure how agreeable or disagreeable a person is likely to be by doing certain tests. When we look at this continuum, we can see agreeableness as being in the middle. Then on one extreme, we have highly agreeable, and then on the other extreme, we have highly disagreeable. So we all fall somewhere on that scale based on these personality assessments. But stated even more accurately, is that we need to see this trait as a dimension of our personality. But what I want to bring to your attention before you say, well, what's wrong with being kind, sensitive, and good-natured? And that is that everything has a positive and a negative side. Like I mentioned about empathy in my previous video, it also does have a dark side. There is a difference between empathy and hyper-empathy. Altruism and self-sacrifice can also veer into pathological altruism. So any behavior taken to an extreme becomes out of balance and problematic. Too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. And our inability to consider this dark side that lurks in our shadow, that we often are unaware of, is what gets us into trouble and keeps us stuck in troublesome situations. Let me give you an example. Highly agreeable people often have a fear of speaking up. They avoid confrontation. They are conflict averse. They have difficulty asking for what they need, and sometimes they don't even know themselves what they need because they've been preoccupied with pleasing others. They have problems with making decisions because they are so focused on the reactions of others because their main aim is to please. And they often don't know why. They feel like they're walking on eggshells, and that's because they're accustomed to tiptoeing around any possibility that they could cause disagreement. There's an underlying fear of negative emotions. They're very self-sacrificial and they tend to just automatically accept blame. These are the nice guys who finish last. They feel deeply unacknowledged and underappreciated. And another area that's very problematic for highly agreeable people is that they are often silently consumed by resentment and anger because they can't express it. They haven't integrated it or are afraid of their anger. So taking self-responsibility means we need to know when our fear of speaking up and disagreeing turns into silence, which then becomes consent. Oftentimes, we end up becoming an accomplice to our own mistreatment. Take into consideration also that if you grew up with a narcissistic parent or an alcoholic or mentally ill caregiver, you probably had to become highly agreeable. It became your survival mechanism. You had to be compliant and submissive to either gain their love and approval or avoid their rage, hypercriticism, and disapproval. So basically, you learned that being highly agreeable could pacify and deflect the anger from another person. And this is just my understanding of it, but perhaps these toxic environments encouraged us to overdevelop that particular trait. So being highly agreeable may have shielded you somehow or gave you some sort of sense of control over your caregiver's oscillating moods. But then again, once we grow up, remaining highly agreeable may be disadvantageous and we will struggle at work to build a career, to feel like we have a life of our own. So what I'm saying is that we need to become aware of when it's advantageous to be agreeable and when it actually becomes disadvantageous and when we are highly agreeable. An interesting thing I heard that got my attention when I was learning about this, because it really resonated for me, was that studies revealed that people who were highly agreeable and highly conscientious, which is another trait, were more likely to remain in low-paying jobs and not complain about it. And I remembered situations in my past where my priority was to keep the peace, to make sure everything was nice at work, despite me seething with resentment because nobody noticed my efforts at work, how hard I worked and how much I cared. And despite having a 7-year uni education, I was embarrassed and frustrated. I couldn't ask for what I needed. I lacked confidence and was instead resentfully compliant. And most of all, I didn't want to cause any disagreements or appear to be ungrateful or impolite or that I was causing waves. Yeah, but inside, a storm was brewing. So was it really the job that I felt stuck in? Was it the boss who I imagined as not recognizing my efforts at fault? Or was it me not speaking up for what I wanted, what I needed, and what I rightfully deserved? I used to be a very highly agreeable person back then. The two questions I was confronted with that were absolutely crucial and signified the difference between me feeling victimized or empowered were: was I angry at the other person for being exploitative? Or was I angry with myself because I kept allowing myself to be exploited? And then that led to, what if I lack the skills how to successfully and efficiently navigate these sort of challenging situations? And another thing that really came to my mind, and is just my interpretation, but can you see how cults, high control groups, certain exploitative corporations would also recruit people who are highly agreeable, and how they would actually encourage people to remain highly agreeable, because highly agreeable people will more easily conform and remain subservient. And you can tell by the way that these organizations would treat those people who would question or disagree with the way the organization is being run. If a person doesn't agree with everything, these organizations will have a problem with that person. Non-compliance by members in a high control group is always seen as a threat, and any area of disagreement is frowned upon. And yes, we're all born with certain traits, but let's also remember that certain situations, people, and society in general does play a role in either discouraging or encouraging the expression of certain personality traits. So let's now look at disagreeable people. These type of people would probably make excellent managers and CEOs because they are more tough-minded, they're competitive, and they are very direct with you. They have no issues telling you what they think, they're assertive, and they will confront you if needed. They won't shy away from disagreeing with someone about something they genuinely feel is not okay with them. And they are okay with being a little argumentative. They don't avoid disagreeing. They tend to be skeptical and maybe not as considerate of others. They think of what they want and they go out and get it. But does this make them evil or unloving? No, it just means that their filters of perception are different to those who are highly agreeable. And that perhaps we could take a page out of their book so we become a little bit more balanced in our approach to life and situations. I've had a few people in my life that I learnt a lot from who showed me the value of sometimes being disagreeable, and I developed a certain respect for these people who were emotionally resilient, who were firm, and they did not shy away from disagreeing with me, but who lovingly confronted me about the things that I was uncomfortable dealing with. And what's interesting as I look back now is that they were mostly men whose confidence and ability to be direct and clear were aspects that I really admired. And that's probably because it was an area that I was lacking in. And what was really interesting for me to learn was that women actually score higher on agreeableness than men. And yes, there will always be a certain level of discomfort when we are dealing with aspects of our own shadow. And that is not a time to project our anger towards those people who have demonstrated the courage to bring something to our awareness. So if we head out towards the extreme of the spectrum and into highly disagreeable, these people will almost intentionally have a problem for every solution. They will pick faults, be belligerent and antagonistic, even hostile, confrontational, always complaining, combative, and they always have a bee in their bonnet about something. It's almost like they seek out things to disagree about. And there may be no logic or reason or any intelligent insight into why they're actually arguing. They just need to be right. So these people who score low on agreeableness or are highly disagreeable can also be described as callous, rude, very critical, harsh, unsympathetic, unfriendly. They're suspicious and aloof. They display less pro-social behaviour and are more focused on their own personal needs, even if those needs conflict with the interests of others. So you can see how narcissists, psychopaths, antisocial personality disordered people would most likely score very low on agreeableness. Agreeableness can also be defined as the tendency to agree and always go along with others rather than assert one's own opinions and choices. And that's why being highly agreeable will make you more likely to be a target of exploitation, both by those who unintentionally find that appealing about you and by those who intentionally look for those traits in others. Narcissists who manipulate your innate compassionate nature to use you as a tool of their gratification. In fact, you'll notice that narcissists automatically just assume that you're stupid and naive because that's what they interpret our compassionate behavior as being. See, being agreeable is not a problem if you're agreeing with someone to something that you genuinely and authentically feel is in alignment with your truth. Agreeableness is great if you honestly agree. But agreeableness ventures into the problematic when you repeatedly and consistently avoid all disagreements just to pacify someone else's hostile behavior. When you're afraid to disagree because you'll be rejected, humiliated, or abandoned. When you fail to say, "I don't agree with you," for the sake of peace, it becomes a problem because then your peacekeeping efforts and high agreeableness enables abuse, control, and exploitation. And just for a moment, let's consider how being highly agreeable would affect others. It could actually provoke their frustration and irritability because highly agreeable people are unwilling or unable to discuss problems or any negative feelings. This could cause the other person to feel resentful. It may be viewed as being coercive or controlling and manipulative. So in relationships, when we are consistently highly agreeable and we don't express how we truly feel, we could be sacrificing intimacy, honesty, and an ability to be authentic. And a common problem that highly agreeable people may find is that their relationships stagnate. We may not even realize how our high agreeableness may lead us to feel extremely lonely and disconnected. One of the most effective ways to bring about more balance, if you're a highly agreeable person, is to work on developing more assertiveness. Learning how to ask for things, how to negotiate, how to be more courageous, and how to get over your fear of confrontation. You need to learn to honor and value your choices. You also need to start feeling completely deserving of receiving what you need. It is not selfish to take care of you. The only cure for existing in a state of exhaustion and resentment is to stop being everything to everyone. It is your responsibility to become more balanced, become more comfortable about disagreeing about things that authentically feel off to you. It'll make others respect you and you'll feel more control of your life instead of feeling victimized by it. And most of all, be honest and truthful with yourself about what's important to you. These are all the things that we need to work on and master in our life if we no longer want to feel exploited and taken advantage of by others with malevolent intentions. Honestly, ask yourself, do you truly believe that your excessive and compulsive agreeableness and niceness will somehow protect you from bad things happening or prevent you from other people hurting you, abandoning you, or rejecting you? Being highly agreeable will not prevent abusive people from harming you. In fact, they'll find your highly agreeable attitude even more appealing because they'll know that you won't disagree to their treatment and you're more likely to make excuses for their bad behavior. You need to know that exploitative people will prefer that you remain passive and non-confrontational. You also need to examine your beliefs about conflict, confrontation, and being disagreeable, and perhaps embrace the fact that sometimes in certain contexts you will have to confront certain people, and if you don't, it will erode your health, sanity, authenticity, and eventually your life. And in those challenging and confronting moments, you need to honor your integrity and prioritize your sanity and stand firm by your own truth. Denial, suppression, and avoidance have no place on your path towards self-empowerment. Yes, that takes monumental courage and self-love. But with practice, once you've defined what you absolutely disagree with, for example, someone being verbally abusive towards you, if you assertively confront them, they'll have two options. They'll either choose to stop or you will have to take yourself out of that situation. There are situations in life where you will have to draw a line in the sand, say no more and mean it. That requires you to embrace your ability to be disagreeable. Don't judge that part of yourself because it can be very helpful. And we can disagree with someone and confront them in a way that's both assertive and loving, because confrontation doesn't necessarily have to mean conflict. If that person isn't a pathological narcissist, perhaps they will appreciate you for confronting them. Disagreeing with someone does not mean it has to be done in a derogatory, humiliating, and shaming way. And of course, controlling people will have a problem with you disagreeing with them because it means they're no longer able to control you. You're calling them out on their BS. You're disagreeing with their superiority. They expect your blind obedience, not your questions about what they're doing, let alone you disagreeing with them. And again, this typically hostile reaction is really inappropriate, and it indicates how warped their perception is. Someone confronting you about something that's important to them is actually an opportunity to gain a better understanding of who they are and how to make the relationship between you better. You can both negotiate and learn to resolve issues. It can be an opportunity for greater intimacy or connection with that person, because when someone feels understood, they feel loved. That's normal, and that's what we all hope to achieve. But seeing disagreeing as a threat and reacting aggressively and dominating you back into silence is toxic to the relationship. In toxic relationships, use your discretion when it comes to voicing any disagreement. Sometimes confrontation isn't about you lacking confidence and assertiveness, but it's about you prioritizing your safety and ensuring that you're not in harm's way with these people. Some people are very dangerous when you disagree with their tyranny, and you can put your life and your children's life in danger if you express any non-compliance to their rules. The slightest sign of you disagreeing can be seen as a threat to them. So tread cautiously, use your wisdom, and be strategic in these situations. Perhaps be more discreet and consider speaking to a counselor or a therapist who can help you navigate these waters. And in that way, you can make incremental changes to your behavior. You can build your confidence and assertiveness incrementally. And be patient with yourself as you learn to modify your behavior so you have a greater sense of control of your life. And I just want to stress the importance of having honest conversations. They are necessary for all healthy relationships. And saying yes to everything all the time, being passive and intentionally avoiding conflict, is actually a sign of unhealthy relationships. Just remember that compliance is the same as lying. Our passivity may communicate a reluctant yes, but our heart says no. So the Big Five personality theory is useful because it can help us broaden our perspectives and help us become more self-aware. And understanding these 5 traits can help our relationships significantly, because it's like you have a blueprint and it gives you insights into yourself and others, and you understand why they behave the way they do. I've only touched briefly on one of the traits that I think is really important for people in this community to understand. If you're healing from narcissistic abuse, if you're struggling as a highly sensitive person or empath, this can offer you a lot of validation of what's going on for you. And research into all of this is still ongoing, and it doesn't explain every aspect of human personality, but it's certainly something that I recommend you continue your own education in. And I'll attach a link in the description box below where you can take this personality test and have a look at where you are on the scale of the Big 5 traits. And those are agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and extroversion. I hope I've interpreted the significance of this one trait in a way that's both clarifying and empowering to you.